Small cheer and great welcome makes a merry feast. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 14th day of Provision 2020 webinar series. Firstly, I would like to welcome Reverend Father Roshan Krasta, Administrator, Father Mullah Homeopathic Medical College, Principal Dr. Shivaprasad K, and Vice Principal Dr. ESJ Prabhukiran to this session. I welcome today's spokesperson, Dr. Kartika M. She is an alumnus of our college and one of my classmates. It's our pleasure to hear you in today's session on eliminating rubric. Welcome, Dr. Kartika. I welcome today's moderator, Dr. Madonna Joseph, HOD of Forensic Medicine and Toxicology to this program. Also, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all the staff of Father Mullah Homeopathic Medical College, all the doctors, students, and other participants. Welcome you all to the live webinar session. I welcome Dr. Madonna Joseph, today's moderator. Over to you, ma'am.
Hello. I'm very glad to inform you, Dr. Kartika, the graduate. She is now presently working as administrative officer in Venkateshwara Homeopathic Medical College, Chennai. She was born in 1987 on 29th April, and she belongs to Chennai, and she has schooling in Chettinad Vidyashram, Chennai. Her mother is A. Shaguntala. She was the principal and correspondent of Venkateshwara Homeopathic Medical College. Kartika had graduated from HMC, Father Mullah HMC on 2010 and was the second rank holder. She was working as medical officer Venkateshwara Homeopathic Medical College since March 2010 and presently working as administrative officer since 2018. She has her private practice in her since the last 10 years. She has presented many papers on management of pediatric cases. The husband is Mr. Praveen, and he is an industrialist. She has 2 children, and son is in 4 years old, and daughter is in pre-KG, 2.5 years old. I am proud to say that she was one of my best students in those years. She was always keeping one of the first 5 ranks from the first year onwards, was very obedient and very studious. After so many years, I am very happy to inform that she is one of the ambassador of the college, doing very well. Kartika, handing over the mic to you. Please share your expertise.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. Am I audible?
Yes, I'm audible. Audible.
Thank you, ma'am. A very good evening to one and all present here. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to thank Father Mullers for this wonderful opportunity. I thank our administrator, Father Roshan Krasta, our principal, Dr. K. Shiv Prasad, our vice principal, Dr. Prabhukiran, for this wonderful opportunity. As we always say, Father Mullers was our home away from home. Today, when we are presenting here, it feels like a glorious homecoming. I thank everyone for this opportunity. Without further ado, we can go into the topic. Is the screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My topic for today is eliminating rubrics, the crux of a prescription. Why did I choose this topic? Whenever I was presented with a case, at the end of the case, during the case analysis, I asked myself a question, whether I was going to treat the man in disease or the disease in man. A lot of times we end up treating just the disease in man. This might be due to various reasons. Maybe because the patient is more attached to the disease, so we also tend to go along with them. When we try to investigate or probe further, they immediately close up. When we ask about the man in a patient, they immediately become self-conscious or wary and close up or give unreliable facts and data. So we are forced to stick to the details we have, which is just about the disease. On the other hand, it could also be because the disease itself is a one-sided disease, as our master Hahnemann said. So it is not present with any more characteristics. It just gives you the disease symptoms. So we just have to stick to the disease and prescribe based upon the symptoms, based upon the particular symptoms. But we all know these kind of cases, the curability is not so good. Our success rates will not be very good. On the other hand, if we try to probe further, investigate into the man and the patient, and we are somehow able to penetrate into his mind, that is when we find the characteristic generals. These characteristic generals form the crux of the case. Once we find the characteristic generals, we will be able to define the man and the patient. Once you've succeeded in defining the man and the patient, we have also succeeded in cracking the case. Yes, it is these characteristic generals, they are going to lead us to the simillimum itself. Whenever I was able to find and identify these characteristic generals, and if I was convinced of their genuineness, I've always used them as eliminating rubrics. I've used the method of prescription called as the eliminating method of prescription. It worked way easier. It saved a lot of time, and also there was less confusion when I used this method. I would like to share some of my success stories using the eliminating method of prescription. Before I share my cases, we will see a glimpse of what is the eliminating process of repertorization and how to arrive at an eliminating rubric. What is repertorization? Repertorization is nothing but a logical elimination of apparently similar remedies. Initially, we have a totality. Based upon that, we have a broad choice of medicines. Using each symptom, we narrow down this field and then arrive at a smaller group of medicines. From this small group of medicines, using a potential differential field and the help of materia medica, we arrive at one simillimum. This is the process of repertorization. So it is a sequence of interdependent and linked procedure followed to get a simillimum or a group of similar remedies with the help of a repertory. We all know there are two types of repertorization, two processes that we use to repertorize. The first process is called as the total addition method. It is also called as the aggregation process. The second one is called as the eliminating process. Kent describes about both these processes of repertorization in his introduction to the repertory. The aggregation process is the most commonly followed and it is easily understood. We put all the symptoms of the totality and treat them equally. All the medicines covered by these medicines are noted down along with their gradings, and we find out the medicines with the highest markings. Among these, we select the simillimum using materia medica. This is the aggregation process. Kent says this is a very scientific method, but it is totally mechanical. Why mechanical? Because we do not put our rational mind into use here. Whatever totality we have obtained, we're just writing it as such and taking down the medicines, and the medicine with the highest markings, few medicines with the highest markings are taken for the final consideration. So Kent calls it, though it is scientific, he says it is a mechanical method. The advantage in this is the possibility of omission is very less. The simillimum for which we are searching will not slip out of our hands. It will never slip out of our hands without us knowing. That is the advantage of this aggregation process. He also gives a second type of repetization, which is called as the eliminating process. Here, we judge or evaluate each symptom. We arrive at a totality. From this totality, we weigh or judge every symptom and decide which particular symptom defines the man. Without which particular symptom, we can't come to a prescription. And we select this as the most important symptom and put it on the top. The rest of the symptoms are also evaluated and a particular hierarchy is formed. Depending upon their importance and value in prescription, a hierarchy is formed and the next symptoms are noted down and so on. Based upon this, we repertorize. We have a repertorial totality. In this repertorial totality, we make sure that only the medicines which are covered by the eliminating symptom, the first symptom written on top, are taken down for consideration. So we have a smaller group of medicines, and these group of medicines are very close to the patient. We don't have many unwanted medicines to confuse us. So this method is much easier, as I said, easier to practice. It consumes less time. It is less confusing, and at the time of prescription, we have a clarity to go on with. That is why Kent called this method as artistic. This method is called as artistic process because it demands judgment. We should judge every symptom that we have in the totality and then select and evaluate the most important symptom. That is why it is called as the artistic process. We should make use of our rational mind, review each symptom, and decide which is the PQRS, the peculiar, queer, rare symptom. It is preferably a general because it is a general which defines the man. So we come to this eliminating symptom through the process of repetization. Margaret Tyler said, success in repetizing depends on your ability to deal with symptoms. At the end of a case, we are presented with a huge matrix of symptoms and we are confused because out of all these symptoms, out of this maze of symptoms, we just have to come to one simillimum. How do I do this? How do I deal with this? How you deal with symptoms and how you weigh each symptom and decide upon its worthiness depends, your success depends on how you judge and weigh each symptom. Now, that is why the evaluation of symptoms is the most important part of any repetization. The most important part of a case analysis is evaluation of symptoms. What is evaluate? Evaluate is to judge or weigh the quality and worth of every symptom and select the most important symptoms and grade them. So it is a process which determines the significance and importance of expressed symptoms. When you evaluate the symptoms, you are presented with three kinds of symptoms. The first is the symptoms of man, which pertain to the vital force. They are nothing but our mental symptoms. The second is the symptoms of physical being. They pertain to the whole body. The third is the symptoms of organs, which pertain to a particular part of the body, to a single organ. How do we grade these symptoms? Dr. Margaret Taylor and Dr. John Ware have written an article called as Repetizing, which is given in the introduction to Kent's Repertory. They beautifully describe how do you grade symptoms and how do you find the most important symptoms among the maze that is presented to you. According to that grading, first comes mental generals. As always, we're talking about Kentian philosophy. Kentian philosophy is inseparable from homeopathy and Hahnemannian philosophy. So as we all know, mental generals assume the first importance. These mental generals guide you and tell you everything that you need to know about a patient. It tells you about the condition of man. It guides you straight away to the choice of the remedy and also tells you if you're on the right path. It shows you about the prognosis. The state of mind is represented by the state of your vital force. The spiritual vital force is what rules the material body in a healthy individual. It rules without any limitations and it keeps it in a harmonious way. When this individual falls sick, it is this vital force which is deranged first. So the mentals are first deranged, followed by physical changes. Also, after the administration of a homeopathic remedy, it is these mentals which should come back to normal. Of course, the abnormal sensations and functions of the disease should disappear, but we can be convinced about the prognosis and the way the case is progressing only if the mental generals also fall back into place and if the vital force is able to rule the body again. That is why, since the mental generals guide us in health, disease, and cure of the patient. That is why the mental generals become the essence of any totality. Among mental generals, the first grade goes to the emotions, the love, hate, aversions, cravings of mind, envy, jealousy, fear, guilt. All your emotions assume first importance. Secondly come the symptoms of your intellect, intelligence, dullness, all these come second. Third will be the symptoms belonging to the memory. So the first importance in the grading of symptoms is given to mental generals. Secondly, soon after mental generals come the reaction as a whole to the bodily environment. It is not the reaction of a single part, how the whole body reacts to the environment, be it to time, to seasons, to heat, cold, damp, dry, tempest, storm, position, touch, jar, motion, rest. To all these to all these environmental conditions, how does your whole body react? That will be the next important symptom. Here, Tyler says you should be very careful that the symptoms should be in capitals and italics, not only in the repertory, they should also be in capitals in the patient. They should be equally marked in the patient. Only then you can consider them for a eliminating symptom. Next comes your cravings and aversions, and they are not just cravings and aversions, they are loathings and longings. The patient should feel them so acutely. He should long or yearn for something or hate something from the bottom of his heart. Only then they can be qualified or elevated to the level of an eliminating rubric. Then comes the menstrual state. What do we have to see in a menstrual state of a female? The most important thing to consider in a menstrual state are her general aggravation and amelioration before, during, and after menses. Sadness before menses, irritability during menses, all her general complaints are better during the flow, or all her complaints are better after the flow, headache after menses, pain in the breast before and during menses. All these kind of general aggravation and amelioration before, during, and after menses have to be considered, and if they're adequately marked, they can also be used as an eliminating symptom. The type of flow, like excessive, scanty, late, or early, is only of lesser importance. We should take it into consideration only if we don't have a diagnosis to justify the flow. If the patient has a fibroid or polyp or a PCOD, it will justify her type and quantity of flow. We know that is why it is excessive, that is why it is late or early. Then that type and quality of menstrual flow assumes no importance. It is of no use at all. We don't have to consider it. The least importance is given to the particulars. I'm not saying we shouldn't consider the particulars, but they only come after all these four reactions. After the mental reactions, the reactions of the body to the environment, the cravings and aversions, the general concomitants before, during, and after menses. Only after these four reactions, we can consider the particulars. So this is how Dr. Tyler explains how we should grade the symptoms. This is Kent's first mention of the eliminating method, out the remedies, not in the mental group or summary. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
Okay. There is no need of writing out the remedies not mentioned in the mental group or summary. These symptoms relating to the whole patient cannot be omitted with any hope of success. Those remedies which do not cover the mental generals need not be considered at all. That is what Kent says here. Because if we omit these mental generals, we cannot hope for any success. This is where he first mentions about an eliminating method. So, who was the first person to coin the word eliminating symptom? Any idea? The eliminating process of repetization was given by Dr. Kent, but who was the first person to coin the term eliminating symptom? Okay. So it is here, the term eliminating symptom was first coined by Dr. Emil Tyler. Dr. Margaret Tyler, when she wrote an introduction to the repertory, which is added in the Kent's repertory, she gave the term eliminating symptom. She defined them as symptoms which throw off all the medicines that are not needed for the patient and bring home only those medicines which are required. It easily eliminates all the medicines which are not close or which are not relevant and gives you a very small group of remedies from which you can easily select. That is why they're called as the eliminating symptoms. This is the definition of the eliminating symptoms. Symptoms which help to eliminate some unimportant medicines to facilitate the selection of similar. As we all discussed earlier, preferably it should be an important general. Only a characteristic general has the quality to become an eliminating symptom. It should characterize the patient. It should identify the man in him. Only if you're convinced that a symptom completely identifies or defines the man in a patient, you can use that as an eliminating symptom. It should cover the whole man and not just a superficial symptom. Since this is a very dangerous method, I would call it a dangerous method because the chances of omission are less. You might omit the very symptom you are in search of. So we should take certain steps of caution before we start using this method. The evaluation of symptoms should be done very strictly. If your evaluation is not proper, after a detailed case taking, you should have a proper portrait of disease and evaluate each symptom and judge its worthiness. Only if it is done properly, you can make use of this method. Otherwise, this process of elimination would prove disastrous. After the eliminating symptom, you should also form a hierarchy of the next important symptoms. That should also be accurate. It is always safer to prefer generals because the chances of omission are less. But if you're convinced that there is a pathological thread throughout the patient, that is, you have a line of pathology running throughout the patient. Suppose if you have a psychotic streak throughout, there's a tumor, or if you have an ulcerative tendency, or if there's a tubercular streak, something like that, if you're convinced of a very particular pathology, that can also be used as an eliminating symptom. Similarly, if a concomitant is reliable and it is found throughout, you can use a concomitant also as an eliminating symptom. Generals are preferred, but if you're sufficiently convinced, you can use a concomitant or a pathological general. And never ever take a single remedy rubric as an eliminating rubric. The symptom which covers just one remedy will be too prejudiced. You cannot take that as an eliminating rubric. Kent also gives us a word of advice while following the eliminating process. Kent says to avoid the danger of omission, to avoid the danger of slipping the drug that we are in search of, you can combine similar rubrics. He gives us certain examples. Suppose a patient says he is afraid of the dark, but you do not know, but you've not been able to elicit whether it is she's scared of the dark or scared of robbers coming inside or scared of ghosts or apparitions. Even after trying to probe or investigate, if you're not able to identify the exact symptom, and if you want to use this as the eliminating symptom, it is safer to combine all these three rubrics. You can combine all the rubrics that you're doubtful of and make a synthesis of rubrics. You can make this synthesis as your eliminating symptom. If you're doubtful about the reliability and you still want to use that particular aspect of the patient as the eliminating symptom, you can use synthesis of rubrics to join these 2 or 3 rubrics and use them as the eliminating rubric. You can use peculiar and strange symptoms. They're found in the characteristics. Suppose you find a very peculiar symptom in the characteristics, you can definitely use them as a eliminating symptom. But if a strong general contradicts, if you have a strong general which points otherwise, it is always good to go in favor of the general. Okay, why? Because the general will have a broader classification, will have a broader number of remedies, and the general also defines the man better. That is why it is better. Kent says when you have a strong general favoring, always go for the general, even better than a characteristic particular. This is best explained by Dr. Pierre Schmidt in his words here. The parts and the whole share the same vicissitudes and pursue the same destiny. He says you can never separate the whole and the parts. Each organ will reveal the entire organism. If we have the eyes to see, every organ will also reveal or explain the entire organism. It is a revelation of the whole organism itself. The whole and the organ are one and the same, but the whole is always superior. That is what Dr. Pierre Schmidt says here. So it is always better to go for a whole symptom, a symptom of the whole, rather than going for a symptom of the organ. So Pierre Schmidt also emphasizes on Kent's word of caution here. So this is what is the eliminating rubric. A rubric which is used to eliminate apparently similar medicines in favor of the simillimum. It helps you to arrive at the simillimum quite easily. It is better if we take a general into consideration. A general symptom should always be considered. These are Ken's concluding words in his introduction to the repertory. As all the stalwarts have said, Materia Medica and repertory, both of them should be used during the case analysis, and never forget to open the Materia Medica finally before you prescribe. These two features of prescribing must go hand in hand. However clear your totality is and however sure you are about the medicine, it is always advisable to open the Materia Medica finally. With this introduction, we can go into the case studies. Okay. This is my first case, Mrs. Lakshmi, an 83-year-old female from Chennai. She visited me in the month of July last year, 2019. She is a known patient of diabetes mellitus and hypertension since 20 years. She's on allopathic treatment for the same. She came to me with the complaints of recurrent symptomatic hepatic cyst since 10 years. A hepatic cyst is usually asymptomatic. It is just a simple benign cyst which does not present with symptoms, only found out through investigations. She presented with a symptomatic hepatic cyst since 10 years. What are the symptoms that she experiences during cyst formation? She will have, as we expect, she will have severe pain in the right hypochondrium, which goes to the right shoulder. There is decreased appetite. Her thirst is increased. Urination is completely decreased. She also has constipation, which is hard stool. Whenever the pain and swelling increases, when she's not able to bear it anymore, aspiration of fluid was done. This has been going on routinely for the past 10 years. Initially, she used to aspirate the fluid every year. Then it became once every 6 months. In the last 2 months, aspiration was done every 15 days or so. She had to go for an aspiration very frequently. Soon after an aspiration, the symptoms of cyst formation started developing. Initially, after the aspiration, she was usually symptom-free for some 10 or 11 months. Only after that, symptoms started. But in this case, but now, since these 2 months, right now, it had just been 2 days when they came to me. It had just been 2 days after the formation, after the aspiration of fluid, but symptoms had started. She had severe pain in the upper abdomen with tenderness. She was taking Ultracet tablets for pain twice or thrice a day. Ultracet is a combination of tramadol and opioid analgesic. She had to take it twice or thrice a day, even against the advice of the doctor, because she couldn't bear the pain. She had become less responsive. She was not eating. She wasn't responding or talking much. The patient had not come to me on the first visit. Her son and daughter-in-law had come to me only for the first visit. These are the symptoms that I had elicited from her son and daughter-in-law. And I also spoke with the patient who just complained of severe pain and that she was not able to pass stool and the urine was very less. These were the only symptoms that she kept repeating when I spoke to her over the phone. These are the scan reports that they brought to me. This was the first scan report last year in 2018. After this, she was symptom-free for 1 year. Then again, the next year in June, is it clear now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay, yeah, okay. Is the screen clear?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So within 5 days after removing the fluid, she developed symptoms, and the scan again showed a cyst which was 14 into 10 into 17. They had to aspirate the fluid again in a week. This happened again next month also, again within a month. So in this month only, they had aspirated thrice. And just 2 days, she had been aspirated on the 18th of July. Within 2 days of aspiration, again she had developed the symptoms of cyst formation. The pain had not subsided at all. Only with Ultraset, her pain is under control. That is the condition with which she came. This is her past history. She had a cholecystectomy done a year back. She had asthma, seasonal asthma 10 years ago. She was on inhalers and has even taken betnosol. But now, after the steroids, the complaints are better. This is her obstetric history. She has 4 children, no abortions. These are her physicals. She's a thirsty patient, chilly. She craves for buttermilk, but nothing very marked here in the physicals. Other than her thirst, nothing was marked. We come to her life space. This is the life space that I got from her son and daughter-in-law. They said she's a very open person. She talks to you very freely. Whoever it is, she does not hold back anything. She does not hide or disguise herself. The word that her daughter-in-law used was, she's a very transparent person, an open book. She tells you anything without any reserve, even if you are a stranger. But there is no excessive loquacity, not that she's talkative, talking all the time, and no flitting of topics. She's a very engaging talker. It is nice to talk to her. We'll feel very happy to talk with her. And she has excessive tolerance. She doesn't complain much. Even during this pain, she is not very complaining. The most important thing they said was she was a very creative person. She always kept building some kind of materials or decorative items out of all the waste articles. She collects all the bottles, the plastic bottles, covers, wrappers we throw, and makes very beautiful items out of it. Her son said she's, in spite of all the work in her childhood, she will always find time to do one of these creative activities. We have never seen her without doing it. She loves crosswords, puzzles. Even at this age, just before her complaint started a month back, she used to sit with the Hindu paper and solve crosswords. She cannot do anything before she solves crosswords on a Sunday morning. She's that kind of a person. And she enjoys the company of children. She has 5 or 6 grandchildren, and all of them confide in her. All of them enjoy talking to her. Whenever there's a family get together or a wedding, there are people surrounding her, swarming her, and the kids love to talk to her and tell her about their exploits. If they are teenagers, they tell her about their problems, their love affairs, whatever it is. The grandchildren have always first opened it to their grandmother, not even to their parents. They've always opened it to their grandmother, our patient. She was very confident and optimistic. She never complains about anyone or talks ill of anyone. These are the words of her son and daughter-in-law. Now, based upon this, what are the rubrics do you think will come up? Can someone put it in the chat box? What rubrics will come up based upon the life space that I have given you now? In the initial years of practice, when we listen to patients, medicines used to come to our mind. But later on, as we listen to patients, we started getting rubrics in mind. Rather than medicines, rubrics came up to our mind. Yes, extrovert, affectionate, very simple, open-minded, artistic, yes, loquacious, extroverted, okay. Cheerful, optimistic, yes, okay. Now, based upon these symptoms from the life space and her case, these are the symptoms that I had selected. I had selected mind activity, creative activity, mind patience, mind communicative, rectum constipation accompanied by liver complaints of general tumor cystic. These are the symptoms I had taken. Out of this, from what I conversed with the patient's relatives, creative activity, I thought, defined the patient as a whole. Even when she was busy with household activities, even when she had issues with her husband, even when she had trouble bringing up her kids, and after she was very old and found it difficult to do anything, even after that, the only thing that was remaining as a thread throughout her life was her love for creative activity, solving crosswords and puzzles and all that. So I took creative activity as the main rubric. The next one is patience. She's never complained about anyone. How much ever is her trouble, she's always been tolerant and never been complaining. And I chose the rubric communicative instead of expansive or loquacity because people enjoy talking to her. Communicative is when someone converses freely and openly and expresses themselves, but is not a boring conversationalist. When they enjoy that conversation, that is when we can make use of the rubric communicative. Expansive is when for simple things they break into a very big explanation. They start giving you big explanations for simple issues. That will be expansive. Loquacity is when they keep on talking and they keep flipping from topic to topic that you cannot pay attention to them. That will be loquacious. But instead, they enjoyed conversing with her. So I chose the topic communicative. So as you've all already guessed, it is a very simple case in that way. We chose the remedy. We got these remedies, phosphorus, chocolate, and podophyllum. I had used the mind activity, creative activity as the eliminating rubric. I thought that defined her better than anything else. Throughout her life, she's always been creative. If not anything else, she has been creative. So I took that as the eliminating rubric here. And phosphorus 200 split dose was given. I normally make use of this split dose where instead of giving just one dose, I give 4 doses on that day, morning, afternoon, evening, and night, so that even if they don't take that one dose perfectly, the other doses will make up for it. Some senior practitioners in Chennai make use of this dosage. That is why I also choose this split dose. So I gave her 4 doses to be taken on the same day at an interval of 4 hours. I gave her phosphorus 200. Follow-up 1, she came by herself. She was much more responsive, so her son brought her to see me. Her urine flow and quantity was improved. That was the only improvement that they said they saw. The constipation remained the same. She had no interest to eat. She had no appetite at all. And she said the pain was the same, but her daughter-in-law said she didn't ask for Ultraset that frequently. She only used them once in 2 or 3 days in the last week. In the last 1 week, she asked for it only once in 2 or 3 days, not every day. They said since the appetite and constipation were the same, they are not very satisfied. But the follow-up criteria I was looking for was the urine, because only when the urine starts flowing, her unease will reduce, her pain will reduce. So that had happened in the first follow-up. In the second follow-up, the constipation, appetite had all improved. She just had loose stools. If she ate a little more, the pain abdomen was better. She had not taken Ultraset at all the past week. But she said since that morning she had a mild pain in the area of aspiration. So I prescribed another dose of phosphorus. I repeated phosphorus after a month. Soon, in a month, she was clinically better and her cheerful, optimistic self. What surprised even me the most was she was very less responsive when they initially came, but she bounced back to her cheerful, optimistic self in just a month. She had no more pains or symptoms of cyst formation. Because of the recurrence, because of a tendency for recurrence, I had given her 1 dose of tuberculinum 200 on 21st of September after a month. Yes, after a month, I had given her just 1 dose of tuberculinum 200. After that, I had not prescribed anything else. This is her latest scan that she brought to me on the January of this month. She just has the residual cyst of 1 into 1 centimeters. The cyst did not enlarge at all. She does not have any symptoms. She occasionally complains of aches and pains, for which I have not prescribed anything. I've just put her on SL, and since January, she does not have any complaints. She is fine. So this is the first case. Why I chose phosphorus? What made me choose phosphorus? Yes, there are many things in the patient, like you said, creative activity, their extrovertedness. But what exactly is phosphorus? Phosphorus is a remedy of youthful charm. Joie de vivre. What does that mean? It means the youthful charm in French. That exactly is phosphorus. Even if you see in this patient, she has retained that youthful charm even through the ripe old age of 83 years. That is why her grandchildren, kids, and even teenagers who hesitate to talk to even their parents come and talk to a grand old lady and confide everything in her. That is phosphorus. they never lose that youthful charm. Phosphorus means the bearer of light. That radiation of light is always there in them. They always attract people. They want people want to talk to them. They attract us, and they are open to the point of being transparent. They hold no reserve at all. They tell us everything, whatever whatever is in their mind. They do not have anything inside. There is no diplomacy or disguise. Even if they are not pleased with you, they 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 do not smile or put up a false face in front of you. At the most, they might keep quiet, but they don't put a false face. That is one more thing about phosphorus. They do not suppress their emotions and put up a false face in front of you. A phosphorus is sensitive to external impressions. They are very sensitive to external impressions. If it be it a simple sunset, they go into raptures looking at a beautiful sunset, and they ask you, when there is such a beautiful sunset to enjoy, why are you worrying about finances, debt, loans, and accounts? That is phosphorus. They cannot take up responsibility. They cannot see anything practical. They avoid the reality and enjoy the fanciness or fantasies more. They enjoy fantasies more than the actual reality. They are very sensitive to external impressions, but they don't want to be grounded. They're just the opposite of calcareas, who are grounded and rooted and very practical. They do not want to take any responsibility in the family. If you have a friend and you tell him about your sufferings, he will just make you happy, sing a song, or dance and make you happy in his own creative way, but he will never give you a solution because he doesn't have a solution for himself. They are very optimistic, never complain. They always think well of other people. Phosphorus is famous for its self-love. They love themselves. They are the opposite of natramures. Natramures hate themselves from inside, but phosphorus love themselves all the way from inside. It is not like the pride or haughtiness of Lyco or Naxomica. Lyco or Naxomica tend to judge others or look inferior upon others. No, for phosphorus also thinks well of others, but they are so much in love with themselves. The self-love is very, very obvious in phosphorus. They are very creative, very elegantly dressed, flamboyantly dressed. You can see a phosphorus only when they come inside, the cheer. And one more thing about phosphorus is the emotional seesaw. We even saw it in this patient. They are quickly excited, they go into state of ecstasy, and if they see something sad in the news or something that happens in the family, they emotionally get very upset. They become very upset and depressed, but they can bounce back to their spirits very fast. That is how we can differentiate between ignitia. Ignitia also has the seesaw. They alternate between laughter and sadness, but the negative symptoms are more marked in ignitia, and they brood themselves in the negativity. But phosphorus cannot see anything sad for a long time. They cannot be sad for a long time. So whatever it is, they bounce back to the cheerful, buoyant self. And phosphorus is also a very fearful person, though you never know it. Phosphorus is very curious, adventurous, and they enjoy everything. They enjoy exploring, but inside they have fears. As we all know, they are fearful of the dark, of thunderstorms, but it is difficult to find that. Only when you ask him, of course, when you ask him, they tell him. When you look at a person, when you look at a phosphorus, you will never know he has all these fears because he is always on a lookout for adventure. This is phosphorus. This was the exact picture that I also saw in the patient, be the youthful charm, the transparency, the optimism, the buoyancy to bounce back, the bouncing back of her spirits. All that I saw in the patient. That is why I gave her phosphorus. We can go to our next case now. The next case is, we'll go to it quickly. This is a case of a 28-year-old female called Mrs. Sudha Vijay Kumar from Chennai. She came to me with inability to conceive. She has been married since 2.5 years. It was a complaint. It was a case of endometriotic cyst of ovary. It was diagnosed at the end of 2010, and they immediately did a laparotomy in 2011. She had a chocolate cyst, and she had already done IUI once before. Since she had not conceived, they did a laparotomy, and she came with and she came to me with the reports. They had suggested to repeat IUI because her ovarian reserve was very less. Already part of her right ovary had been removed along with the cystectomy, and her left ovaries were also enlarged and cystic. So they said her ovarian reserve was less, her chances of normal conception was not possible, was not there. So they suggested IUI again. She was not ready to go through an IUI, so she came to me. Otherwise, her menses was regular. She had dysmenorrhea and offensive leukorrhea. She was a hyperthyroid and she was on Eltroxin 50 since 2 years. This was her reports. She came with she had a chocolate cyst, for which a laparotomy was done in early February 2011. This is a scanned report after the laparotomy. She still had a cyst which was 2.3 to 1.7 centimeters, and her left ovaries were also cystic. This is how she presented to me. She had done tonsillectomy. She was a thirstless patient. Other than that, nothing much was visible. Then comes her life space. She is usually mild and friendly, but nowadays she's very irritable for trifles. Her husband said, I get very scared to go to her because she suddenly breaks into she suddenly bursts into tears without any cause. She starts crying, and she's also very irritable to her parents and to her in-laws also. She keeps annoying them or getting annoyed. She's always childish. She doesn't know what to say and when to say. She says things which are totally inappropriate in a gathering. If she is eating dinner which is prepared by her mother-in-law, she'll just say, this gravy is not spicy at all. How can we eat it? Don't you know how to make crispy dosas? Like that, the husband said, she says things like that on the face to even my mother. She does not know what to say and how to say it. She's quite an affectionate person, very possessive, loving. And he said one more thing. She said one more thing. She is absent-minded. She forgets where she puts her stuff. And she says she always has a feeling as if she's forgotten something. She might have finished her household chores and kept everything in order, but still at the back of her mind, she feels as if she's missed doing something, and she keeps going and checking them again. She always has a feeling that something is not done or she's forgotten to do something. That forgotten to do something was always there. And from what I understood when I explained to her how to take her medicines, or I explained her conditions to her about her reduced ovarian reserve and all, she was not able to grasp it. I had to repeat it many times to make her understand even simple things. And she herself told me that she was very scared of ghosts. She said whenever the room is dark or the power goes out, she always sees ghosts or apparitions. She is very scared of the ghosts. It was not the dark she was scared of, she was scared of ghosts. So these are the symptoms that presented to me during her life space. What are the rubrics which you would like to select for these symptoms? Childish, absent-minded, quarrelsome, dull reception, okay, fear, absent-minded, yes, okay. So the rubric, the symptom that struck me as most important was her indiscretion. What do you mean by indiscretion? They do not know what to say and when to say. It is a very childish symptom. Suppose there's a child, he does not know how to behave in front of guests. If you have guests in the living room and the child wants to use the washroom, he will not discreetly push away his chair and say, I would like to use the washroom. He'll stand up on his chair and say, I want to go pee. That is a child. The same symptom, when they grow up like that, that becomes indiscretion. What is indiscretion? They do not know what to say and when to say. That symptom was very much marked in her. That is why I had taken the symptom indiscretion. And of course, she said she has fear of ghosts. And she also says she has a feeling as if she's forgotten something constantly. More than absent-minded, she kept repeating this symptom saying, I always feel as if something is forgotten. That something I've not done something, I've forgotten to do something. That is why I chose this symptom instead of absent-minded. Stomach thirstless, female tumors, ovary cyst, and female endometriosis. So these are the symptoms that I selected, and the rubrics that I finalized was indiscretion. I mean, the eliminating symptom that I stuck to was indiscretion, because That is what she also said. She also said, I do not want to talk like that and make a fool of myself. I know I'm embarrassing myself, but in spite of that, I'm doing this. I am talking indiscreetly. That is why I took the medicine. I chose the remedy. I choose the rubric indiscretion. Okay, so this is the repertorial totality and the repertorial chart. We have Pulsatilla, Lycopodium, Lachesis, and Causticum. For this patient, I had prescribed Pulsatilla 200 split dose. In the first follow-up, her appetite was better and leukorrhea was better. She came after 2 weeks. I had prescribed SL then in the first follow-up. In the second follow-up, her leukorrhea was better. She had normal menses and she did not have dysmenorrhea this time. Until then, she had dysmenorrhea, but after that, she stopped having dysmenorrhea at all. She had mild indigestion and heartburn. She took Pulsatilla 200. I again gave her Pulsatilla 200. Then after that, I did not give any medicines. Her periods was normal. She did not have dysmenorrhea, no much leukorrhea also, no offensiveness of the leukorrhea. So I did not give her anything. After 5 or 6 months, still she was having regular menses and she complained of occasional pain in the left ovarian region during ovulation. I gave her Tuja 200 because that psychotic streak was also prominent in her. So I thought of giving her an intercurrent remedy and I prescribed 1 dose of Tuja 200. Even after Tuja 200 for 2 months, she did not conceive. So on the 6th of Jan, the 6th of Jan 2012, I raised the potency. I was quite sure of my remedy, so I didn't want to change. I had given her Pulsatilla 1M. Within that month, the next month only, she conceived and her urine pregnancy test was positive. This is her test report, her scan report when she came with positive pregnancy. She went on to deliver a healthy girl child. She did not have any problems during her pregnancy. Now, again, why Pulsatilla? If you go through Pulsatilla, whenever I try to remember a Pulsatilla adult, I first remember a small child, any child of 2 to 5 year old. What are the traits that you see in any child? We see an uninhibited expression of emotions. They do not hide or disguise their emotions. When they are happy, they laugh, they come hug you and kiss you. When they are in pain, they immediately cry and they cry until they are consoled. Once they are consoled and that pain goes away, it is all forgotten. They express their emotions without any inhibitions and they ask for instant gratification. All children are famously selfish until you give them whatever they want, whatever kind of situation you are in, until you give them whatever you want, they will pester you and make you do it. Once that gratification is over, when whatever they want is done, they're again happy. They go back to being their mild self, devoted to you, very coy and nice, well-behaved children. But again, when they want something, they become petulant and irritate you, and they also become irritable. One more characteristic of a child is that dependency. They are always in search of that one person whom they are attached to, and they should look up to that person for each and everything. And they are fearful of change. When they're taken to a new surrounding, a new atmosphere, a new school, when strangers come in, they get scared and they go and attach themselves to that one person, mostly a parent. So that is all these features are seen in Pulsatilla. That is why most of the children are Pulsatilla, but we don't get to see as many Pulsatilla adults because as they grow up, intellect kicks in. This is only when emotions are predominating. As the child grows up, the feature of intellect kicks in and other features like self-esteem, diplomacy, ego start coming in. So this uninhibited expression of emotion stops and they grow up into different other constitutional types. Mostly a Pulsatilla child grows into an attribute where she learns to disguise or suppress her feelings. She might learn to become a phosphorus who is diplomatic, or she might go into an ignitia who suppresses her grief. But nobody remains, but very few people remain with that childlike nature or childlike innocence. Even when they grow up, they express their emotions just as they did when they were small, and they seek instant gratification. A lot of Pulsatilla women make sure whatever they want is done immediately. Whatever they want is done immediately. And that dependency forever in her life, a Palsatla is in search of a person to anchor herself to. Initially, it is a parent, then it is a husband, and then it will be her son. So she can never be herself. She does not have her own philosophy, views, political views. She will not even have a personal choice. She will not have a personal actor or a personal favorite dish. Whatever she likes will be the choice and views of the person whom she is dependent on. That is why she is said to be irresolute, indecisive, and all that. She will always depend upon a person. And a Palsatla patient will always look for physical warmth. They love to be touched, hugged, given a pat. A child will blissfully lie on the laps of a father. Similarly, a woman, an adult, will also want to be hugged or caressed all the time. That is Palsatla. They're fearful of change. That is why throughout their life, when change happens at puberty, during pregnancy or menopause, whenever change happens, complaints crop up in Palsatla. They are scared of losing that dependency. That is why complaints crop up. So because I found all these things, and most importantly, I found that indiscretion. A child who does not know what to say, when he feels something, he does not filter it. He does not filter it through his intellect. He immediately says it. That is seen in this patient as an adult. That is why I chose Palsatilla for this patient, and it helped her to a great extent. We move on to the next case. It is a case of a 34-year-old female from Chennai. She also came with inability to conceive, but it was a case of secondary infertility. She had a spontaneous abortion in third month twice. Twice she got pregnant, and she spontaneously aborted for no particular reason. And since the last abortion, she has been having delayed menses once only every 2 or 3 months. Since this 1 year, only if she takes progesterone, she is getting her menses. That has been a condition since 1 year. She had her menses last on the 7th of February. She came to me on 15th. She had her menses just 1 week before that. She also has the symptom of mild bleeding per vagina the next day after coition. She does not have any dyspareunia, no weight gain or hirsutism. She was on dexamethasone and cyphine for infertility, but stopped them a year back. It did not give her any results. She was on steroids for more than 3 years. That did not help her, so she stopped taking them a year back. This is how she came to me. These were her ultrasound reports when she came to me. The uterus was anteverted and anteflexed. It was a bulky cervix. Endometrium was thickened, and she had bilateral PCOD. She got headaches in summer due to the perspiration. Her most marked physical generals was her thirst. She said she always had to have a bottle of water in her hand, and she'll keep drinking throughout the day while cooking, while working outside. Anytime she wanted water, she drinks lots of water. This is the life space of the patient. This is a very interesting story. She is the first daughter-in-law of the family. Her husband has 3 younger brothers, and her husband is the guardian for all of them. Her father-in-law had passed away. Her husband is just running a mechanic workshop. They come from a lower middle class family. This patient, soon after she got married, she readily took over the responsibilities and lovingly took care of her husband's family. A typical housewife, she took care of them with love and affection. She even spent her money or savings for them. They were all either studying or struggling to find a job. So she helped all her brothers-in-law to get settled until they all got married, and they all have children now. She is helping them even now through every phase of life. But she does not have a child yet. All her brother-in-law and co-sisters are very attached to her. She cannot stand any disputes. Even if there's a little problem, she will intervene and bring back peace. Even if at the cost of her own health or other issues, even sacrificing her own issues, she will try to bring back peace in the family. She is the peacemaker of the family. She always wants company. She likes to have a lot of people in the family. This is her life space. What do you think are the symptoms? What do you think are her rubrics? Okay, desires company, responsible, benevolence, yes. Responsibility towards family, okay. So these are the rubrics that I selected. As you suggested, benevolence is the most important trait of her. Right from the beginning, right from the moment she got married and got into the family, she took up the responsibility, but she did not hold back anything as hers. Whenever help was required, she did not think it was her husband's responsibility to take care of her brothers. She sacrificed her health, her time, and also her money or savings for the sake of her brothers-in-law. So the first rubric that I took was benevolence, and the second rubric was responsibility, taking responsibility too seriously. She did not take up responsibility at a very young age, but whatever was presented to her, she took it too seriously. That is why I took that particular sub-rubric. She need not have been so responsible. That is only her husband's problem. She did not think like that. She took it upon herself and made sure that each of her brothers-in-law settled, married, and with a suitable job. Then, of course, she was the peacemaker of the family. So I chose the rubric harmony desire for, metorrhagia coition after, abortion third month. Something very interesting came up in this case after I found out her epidural totality. I have very characteristic particulars here. Female metorrhagia coition after, and of course abortion third month in particular. In both the instances of abortion, it was in the third month. When I took these two rubrics alone, I got creosote. So I was tempted to treat the disease in man. I wanted to give creosote, but I remembered to place importance in the generals, and I thought I will start trying with the generals first. That is why I took benevolence as my eliminating rubric. I did not take any of the particulars. Instead, I stuck with benevolence and did not prescribe creosote. These are the Are you able to hear me? Is my connection stable? Okay. These are the rubrics that I
Yes,
selected.
Dr. Kartika.
Thank you. And I prescribed carcinosin. Soon after carcinosin, her bleeding for vagina stopped. So I was convinced about the curability of my remedy, because this is what we want to stop in the first instance. And soon after that, she did not have any bleeding PV after coition. Okay. And when she came for follow-up too, it was time for her menses and she didn't get her menses. Earlier, I had advised her to stop regestrone. She had been continuously on regestrone for a year. So I thought because of that, she wasn't getting her rubrics. So I asked her to wait for for 1 more week. And then we will decide about the course of action. But to my surprise, immediately she conceived. She had not conceived for 13 long years. She was not on treatment also for 1 year. But soon after carcinosin, she conceived in just that month. And she went on to deliver a healthy baby boy. I was the first person to be surprised and astonished because it did not take much time. It was just 1 month. So carcinosin was so suitable for her. She came back 4 years later with frequent menses. She didn't have any tangible cause for that. She said suddenly, since these 2 months, she's having menses every 15 days. Without a second thought, I prescribed carcinosin again. And she did not come back again. She said her problem was cured. She just messaged me and said she is again normal now. So this is her report when she had conceived. Now, why carcinosin? As we all know, carcinosin has a very strong sense of responsibility. We say it is because of a very strict parental brought up. But it's not just because of that. Carcinosin itself has an innate need for perfection. They always strive for perfection. They have a neurotic need for perfection. They cannot do anything with faults. They are faultless. But we cannot say they are similar to the mineral remedies like Kali or Aurum, who have that craving for order, who are very strict and robust. They are not like that. Carcinosin also has a creative and artistic side. They have a very good sense of dressing. They have creative interests. They are mostly artists or painters, or they are in the field of advertising. They also have a creative side to them, and they are very, very sensitive. Because they are perfect, because they are faultless, they cannot stand the smallest amount of reprimand also. And like we saw, they take up responsibility very willingly and also strive very hard to make it possible, even at the cost of their health and anything else. They will make sure they will take up high responsibilities and make sure they have achieved it. That is carcinosin. The next case is a case of a 13-year-old girl. She came with swelling in the neck, which was noticed recently, and weight gain. She had gained 10 kgs in the past years. This is her TSH. She came to me with a very high TSH of 143. She attained her menses just a year before. She came to me in 2019. She had attained her menarche in 2018. Her menses was still regular, but she had concentration in studies. She was very dull. She was very lazy. She does not do anything. She's usually a lazy child, but nowadays it is very, very marked. That neck swelling was what made the mother to go in for a thyroid checkup, and she found out that her TSH was this high. She had all her milestones delayed, but she was a normal child except for recurrent respiratory infections. Her mother was a hypothyroid and her father was obese. These are her physical generals. She was 62 kg when she was just 13 years old. Her height is 150 centimeters. Nothing very marked about her physicals. These are all only after I asked her, she told them. Her gland is a diffuse uniform enlarged thyroid gland, no nodules. It was just a uniform enlargement of thyroid gland. This is her life space. She has a 8 years younger sister. She is very easily consolable. She always has a rivalry with her sister because she's very young. She always keeps fighting with her, but she is very easily consolable. She is very close to the mother. She always needs her mother by her side. She does not let her go anywhere. Her sister was my first patient 2 years back. Even during that time, she used to stand by her mother or stand behind her mother and hold her mother's hand all the time. She is very timid, but she talks quite well to close people at home or to friends. But then when she was there in my clinic, she always looked down and didn't answer much. She takes time to understand and grasp even simple concepts. She is also very weak in studies. She is very lazy. Her mother said she does not even get up to drink water or pass urine. So her provisional diagnosis, like we all know, is diffuse hyperplastic goiter. This is the kind of goiter which develops because of physiological reasons in puberty or pregnancy, when the thyroid gland is not able to meet the demands of the metabolism. When the metabolic demands are high, and the gland cannot function enough, it develops goiter that is called as diffuse hyperplastic goiter with hypothyroidism. That is the provisional diagnosis, and these are the rubrics that I had selected. I chose clinging to the mother as my main rubric because I have seen her even 2 years back. Even at that time, her younger sister wouldn't cling so much to her mother. She used to roam around in the clinic and explore things. But this elder sibling always used to stand by her mother and hold her hands. So I took this rubric. And of course, the laziness was very marked in her. And her mother said, like her father, she eats a lot. She likes eating, and how much ever she says, she cannot control her desire for eating. So I took the rubric gluttony, which gave the cross-reference to bulimia. That is why I had taken this rubric, bulimia. And of course, I took these rubrics. This was the repertorial chart. And I came up with Zephia, Baratecarb, and Natromure. But I chose Baratecarb because of the obvious reasons. I will tell you about it. I had given her Baratecarb mid-dose, and asked them to investigate the thyroid antibodies because she came with a very high level of TSH. It was 143. But her TPO, thyroid peroxidase, and the ATG, that is anti-thyroglobulin, both her thyroid antibodies were normal. So we can rule out any thyroiditis, autoimmune thyroiditis or Hashimoto's. She does not have Hashimoto's or autoimmune thyroiditis. It is just a case of diffuse hyperplastic goiter. And immediately her results, her TSH came down to 64. When such high levels of TSH are there are 2 more cases in which I have this experience. They come down very fast. Only when the thyroid levels are in that range of 8 or 7, it is difficult to bring it down to below 5. When there are high levels, they rapidly decrease. and her weight was also reduced by 1 kg in just 2 weeks. Again, the TSH in the follow-up, I had just prescribed SL. In the second follow-up, in some more time, after a month or so, her TSH reduced to 14.81 and her weight reduced a little bit only. So I advised diet and physical exercise. By November, she had come to me in August. By November, her she had come to me in August, but by November, her TSH had come down to 14.2. Then I repeated Baritakar. The neck swelling was also considerably reducing. And when she came in February to 2020, just before the lockdown, these were her TSH levels. It had come down to 9.43. She is still under treatment. Her neck swelling is considerably reduced. Not much is visible now. Her concentration is very good. Her school records are better. Her teachers are giving her good reports. Her weight is also reduced. This is her report. It has not come down to normal. I couldn't ask her to repeat the test because of COVID. It was 143 on the 2nd of August. It had come down to 14.8 by September. And the last report, this is the September report. This is the recent report that I have got. It is 9.43. It hasn't come down to normal yet, but I'm sure it is going in the right direction because her general concentration has improved and the dullness is better. Now we all know why I prescribed Baritakar. Baritakar is known for its dwarfishness. Baritakarbs are not dwarfish just physically. They are not small. Baritakar is stunted either mentally or emotionally. And we can prescribe Baritakar if the whole body, if the child continues to grow, but one organ stops growing. Kent calls it as the one-sidedness or partiality of development, one-sidedness of development. It stops the child from growing into a woman or a man. The child continues to grow, but one organ stops growing. And because of the dullness, the timidity, this tendency to hide is very marked in Baritakar, and immaturity, social and emotional immaturity. They do not mingle very easily. Of course, Baritakarbs grow up and match with their peers, but they take some more time. It is not always a low IQ remedy. We should not think of it only in people with low IQ. Baritakarbs are just, they take time to catch up with their peers. They have to take time to become socially mature and mingle with the society. They are earthy, like a calcarea carb, they are earthy. That is where comes their irresistible desire to eat. That gluttony is a feature of earthiness. Earthiness is nothing but a crudeness. They do not have any refined skills. They have very little social grace. That is why I prescribed Baritakar. Now, these are the 4 cases. Based upon just the mental generals, I was able to come to an eliminating rubric and solve these cases successfully. I would like to conclude with this aphorism 211, where Hahnemann says, our master says that this mental, without the disposition of the patient, we can never cure him. And this disposition is the least of all concealed. We can easily identify, it reveals itself to an accurately observing physician. So a physician who is astute enough can obviously find out the disposition very easily, and based upon that, the prescription can be done. With this, I conclude. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Father Mullers, our administrator, our principal and vice principal for this opportunity. I also thank our college administration, management, staff and students, Venkateshwara Homeopathic Medical College for their support. I thank all my colleagues and family for their support and love. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kartika. Kartika, for you, some questions are there.
Yes, sure.
For the first case, which repertory was used? That was one question.
All the cases I had made use of synthesis. Only in some symptoms, for some symptoms like metorrhagia during coition, I had used Murphy. Otherwise, in most of the cases, I used only synthesis.
Okay. And one more question. What is split dose?
Yeah, it is followed by many practitioners in Chennai. When we decide to give a single dose, instead of just giving one single dose, we give them four doses One dose is taken in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, and one at night. This is taken on an empty stomach. We prefer this dose because a single dose might not be taken properly. They might take it after their food, or they might eat soon after the single dose, so that effectiveness goes away. Since we are just dependent on that one dose for our action, we prefer the split dose. It is practiced by Dr. A.U. Ramakrishnan, who is a famous homeopath in Chennai. Because of our association with him, I learned to prescribe this dose.
Okay, one more question. Self-love of phosphorus and selfishness, are they both same?
Okay, you cannot say phosphorus is totally selfish. Phosphorus will want to help others, but that helping others is done only because it makes him happy. Phosphorus is all about his happiness, but at least for that happiness, he will help others. In contrast, carcinosin takes it upon themselves, even at the cost of their health and wealth, they go to help others. Phosphorus also does that. Phosphorus also is a benevolent remedy. They also help others, but it is only for their own happiness. And only until they feel happy, they help others. Self-love is because they like themselves so much. That is why they dress up, and they're swarmed by people. They love themselves so much. That is self-love. Self-love and helping others is not the same. They are two different aspects. I saw one more question. Somebody asked me about Baraita-carb indiscretion. Yes, Baraita-carb is also famous for, Baraita-carb also is an indiscreet remedy. It is a it is a 3-mark remedy in indiscretion. But Baraita-carb is stunted mentally. This is not, Pulsatilla is not stunted mentally. She has intellectual growth, but she decides not to use her intellect. She has decided to remain emotional because it keeps her happy. It keeps her pampered. So that is the difference between Baraita-carb and Pulsatilla. Baraita-carb does not have intellectual maturity. Pulsatilla has decided not to use her intellectual maturity and to remain a child.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kartika, for this wonderful session. Actually, we were back to our clinical meeting or clinical meeting days, and we are happy that you are practicing the same way what you learned in Father Muller's, and you are remaining the same mixture of pulsatilla and phosphorus now also. Very helpful and very mild also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sebastian. Yeah.
I would like to thank the management for providing a platform, very good platform for this webinar. And this is not the end. Today we are coming with 2 more sessions. One is at 4:30. Tomorrow we are coming with 2 more sessions. One is at 4:30 by Dr. Sripad Hegde. He is
4 o'clock.
He is talking on 4 o'clock. He is taking class on qualitative research on anemia in patients with diabetes mellitus. And at 7:30, Dr. S.K. Tiwari, his topic is prescribing in homeopathy. So stay tuned to our Zoom ID. This is Dr. Sebastian signing off. Good night. Thank you all.